You wait all year for one day. Just one. Not for gifts or cake, but for the feeling that someone remembered. That someone sees you. On my 16th birthday, no one did. No calls. No hugs. Not even a happy birthday from my own parents. But 1 week later, I came home to balloons, streamers, a cake with glittering candles, and all of it was for my stepsister. This is the story of how I stopped being the daughter and became invisible in my own home. And if you do, don't forget to subscribe. This channel isn't just about stories, it's about finally being heard. The morning of my 16th birthday felt like every other school morning. The sun was barely up, the house was quiet, and the hallway smelled faintly of burnt toast from the kitchen downstairs. I got out of bed half expecting anyone, to say something. Maybe a card on my nightstand. Maybe my mom with her usual, half-distracted happy birthday, sweetheart. Maybe my dad joking about me being officially a lady now. But there was nothing. Just the soft click of the bathroom door shutting, my stepmother humming a song I didn't know, and my father scrolling through his phone in the kitchen like it was just another Wednesday. I sat down for breakfast in silence. No one looked up. Even my stepsister, Emma, barely glanced at me. She was too busy texting and flipping her hair and complaining about gym class. I tried to catch her eye once. I was hoping maybe she remembered, but she just asked if I'd seen her black hoodie. I left for school without saying goodbye. I told myself maybe they were planning something for later. A surprise. A dinner. A cake hidden in the oven. Something. Anything. At school, a few friends remembered. Not many. 2 people wished me casually in the hallway. My English teacher handed back my essay and said, "Oh, happy birthday, I think." I nodded and smiled, pretending it didn't hurt. I'd told no one except one friend, months ago. I guess I hadn't expected anything grand, but still, it was my 16th. It was supposed to matter. By the time I came home, the house was dark. My parents were out. Emma was at a friend's. No note. No dinner waiting. Just an empty kitchen and silence that rang louder than any scream. I opened the fridge, pulled out leftovers, and sat at the table alone. No candles, no music, no Make-A-Wish. I blew out the kitchen light myself and went to bed. The next morning, my mom casually asked if I wanted to pick up milk on my way back from school. That was it. Not even a "sorry, we missed your birthday." No mention. No guilt. Just nothing. I didn't say a word. I nodded and left. And that silence? That was the moment something in me cracked. But the real break came a week later. It was a Saturday. I came home after tutoring, tired, backpack heavy, earbuds in, and I froze the moment I opened the door. The hallway was lit up with string lights. Laughter echoed from the living room. Someone yelled, "She's here," and I actually smiled for a second, for just one stupid second, because I thought maybe they hadn't forgotten. Maybe they just messed up the date. Maybe this was for me after all. But then I saw the sign. Big, gold, glittery letters. "Happy Sweet 16, Emma." There she was in the center of the room, wearing a pink sash and blowing kisses to a crowd of our extended family, people I hadn't seen in months. Friends from her dance school. Neighbors. Even that girl she pretended to hate from math class. There was a cake on the table with her name in frosting. Balloons shaped like a giant 16. A speaker playing her favorite music. A rented photo booth in the corner. And in the middle of it all, my mom, laughing and filming with her phone, and my dad handing out party hats like he was the world's most doting father. No one noticed me standing in the doorway. No one asked where I had been. And in that moment, surrounded by glitter and noise and the loud celebration of someone else's life, I realized something I had been too scared to admit until then. They hadn't just forgotten my birthday. They had erased it. Like I didn't exist. Like my 16th year didn't count. Like Emma was the only one worth showing up for. I didn't cry in front of them. I didn't storm out. I just quietly turned around and walked back outside, letting the door close behind me. My feet carried me down the street before I even realized where I was going. I didn't have a destination, just the need to get away. I ended up at the small park near our old apartment. We used to live there before my dad remarried. Before the house with a bigger kitchen and fancier furniture. Back then, we didn't have much, but he used to remember. He used to care. I sat on a cold bench and watched families pass by. Kids running. Parents calling out. And I kept wondering, when did I stop being seen? When did I become the background? A text buzzed on my phone. It was from my mom. Don't forget to clean up the dishes when you get back. We're still hosting. That was it. Not where are you? Not we missed you. Just dishes. I turned my phone off and stared at the sky. And that was when I decided, if they weren't going to show up for me, then I'd stop showing up for them.
I didn't go home that night.
I walked for a long time with no direction, just passing empty streets and glowing windows that weren't mine. I ended up at my friend Layla's place. I hadn't texted her, hadn't called. I just showed up at her front step with red eyes and frozen fingers. She opened the door, took one look at me, and said nothing. Just pulled me inside and wrapped me in the kind of hug I didn't realize I needed until I felt it. We sat on her bed, her fairy lights glowing above us, the quiet hum of her fan spinning like a soft rhythm behind our silence. I didn't explain much, just told her what happened, how they didn't even say the words happy birthday, how they threw a party for Emma with all the things I secretly dreamed of but never said out loud. She didn't interrupt me, didn't offer the kind of sympathy that sounds fake. She just listened, and when I finished, she said, "You're not crazy. You're just surrounded by people who treat you like you don't matter." And that line, that sentence, did more for me than anything my family had ever said. I stayed at her place for the weekend. Her mom gave me tea without asking questions. Her dad made extra pancakes. They didn't press for details, but they made space for me. And that's all I really wanted, to feel like someone noticed I was there. When I returned home late Sunday night, the house was spotless. No party streamers, no balloons, no trace of celebration. Just the faint smell of cleaning spray and a trash bag filled with crumpled gift wrap in the bin outside. My room was untouched, as always. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, and made a silent vow. I was done waiting for them to remember me. Over the next few weeks, something in me changed. I stopped trying to be seen. I stopped coming downstairs early to say good morning. I stopped offering to help around the house. I stopped smiling politely when they talked about Emma's grades, her auditions, her upcoming dance recital. It wasn't passive-aggressive. It wasn't spite. It was detachment. Pure and simple. And no one noticed. Not even when I started skipping family dinners. Not when I stopped replying in the group chat. Not even when I came home late one evening, face blotchy from crying after failing a test, and walked past my mom in the kitchen without a word. She didn't even look up from her phone. The truth was, I had become invisible long before my birthday. That day just confirmed it. Emma, of course, thrived in the spotlight. She started calling my parents mom and dad like they had always been hers. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Not that they loved her, but that loving her came with forgetting me. One afternoon, I overheard my stepmother on the phone. She was laughing, telling someone, "Emma's like the daughter I never had." I stood in the hallway, frozen. My chest didn't tighten. My eyes didn't water. I just stood there, numb. Because when someone keeps showing you you're not part of their picture, eventually, you stop trying to frame yourself into it. At school, I started spending more time with teachers and in the library. My English teacher, Ms. Rayner, became my anchor. She noticed the shift before anyone else. After class one day, she asked me to stay back. She looked me in the eyes and said, "You've stopped raising your hand. You've stopped speaking up. That's not you. What's going on?" I hesitated, then said, "Nothing that can be fixed." She didn't push, just nodded and said, "Okay, but I see you. Even if no one else does right now, I do." It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in months. That night, I opened my journal and wrote a single line. If I'm invisible to them, then maybe it's time I start building a life where I don't need to be seen by them at all. And from that moment on, that became my mission. I applied for a summer writing program in another city. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't mention it at dinner. I used the money I had saved from tutoring and part-time work. When the acceptance email came, I packed my things quietly, booked a train ticket, and left a single note on the kitchen counter. Gone for the summer. Don't wait up. They didn't call. No texts. No emails. Nothing. But for once, it didn't destroy me, because I was finally doing something for myself. Something that didn't require their approval. The writing program changed everything. I met other girls with messy families, with grief buried under good grades and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. We stayed up late writing stories we were too scared to say out loud. We read our truths to each other like they were confessions. I wrote about the birthday, the silence, the party I watched from the doorway. When I read it out loud one night during workshop, the room went silent. One girl was crying. Another reached for my hand. And I realized I wasn't the only one who had ever felt forgotten. That summer, I remembered who I was. Not the forgotten child. Not the backup plan. Not the afterthought. I was a writer. A storyteller. Someone with a voice strong enough to echo through the kind of silence that once swallowed me whole. When I returned home at the end of summer, nothing had changed. No hugs. No, how is it? Just my dad asking if I remembered to bring back the house key. My mom mentioned something about laundry. Emma was planning her next birthday already. But I didn't flinch. Because now, I had something they couldn't take from me. A sense of self that didn't rely on their attention. And that, more than any cake, any candles, any party, was the gift I never knew I needed. The following weeks at home were quiet, but not peaceful. There's a difference. Silence in my house wasn't warm. It was the kind that builds walls between people sitting in the same room. No one asked about my summer. No one asked what I wrote, or who I met, or if I learned anything new. But what struck me most wasn't the absence of questions. It was how normal it all seemed to them. My mom was back to planning her weekly grocery trips, complaining about work, fussing over Emma's dance rehearsals. My dad mumbled hello in the mornings and buried himself in his laptop by evening. Emma floated through the house like a favorite, the chosen one. And maybe she was. Maybe she had been since the day she arrived and learned how to fit into their lives in a way I never could. I started spending most of my time in my room or at the library. Anywhere but the house. I wasn't angry anymore. Just distant. I had grieved the version of my family I once believed in. What remained now was just the slow, quiet work of moving on. Not dramatically, but deliberately. One afternoon, while clearing out my drawer, I found an old birthday card from when I turned 12. It was handwritten by my dad. Messy penmanship, a little cheesy, but sincere. To my bright, unstoppable girl, the world is yours. I'm so proud of you. I sat there staring at those words, trying to remember what that version of him sounded like. That man, the one who wrote that message, where did he go? I wondered what changed. Was it the remarriage? The shift in family structure? Or did they just get used to me never asking for anything, so they assumed I didn't need to be cared for? It's strange how love fades without people noticing. Eventually, I stopped trying to answer those questions. Some things don't need conclusions. They need closure. So, I started creating one for myself. I returned to my writing, not just journaling, but sharing pieces online under a pseudonym. Tiny stories, vignettes, poems about invisible daughters and forgotten birthdays. Some went unnoticed, but others struck nerves. Comments started rolling in. Strangers saying, "This sounds like my life," or "I didn't know anyone else felt like this." And in those comments, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time: validation. Not the performative kind that comes with likes and reposts, but the real kind. The kind that says, "I see you. I've been you. You're not alone." Through that small online space, I built something I never got at home, a version of family. Quiet, distant, faceless even, but rooted in mutual understanding. And maybe that's what I needed most. Not attention. Not gifts. Just someone who knew the weight of being forgotten and still chose to keep showing up. At school, I kept to myself more than before. I wasn't bitter. I had just outgrown the need to constantly explain myself. I no longer corrected people when they said things like, "Your parents must be so proud." I just smiled and changed the subject. Ms. Rayner, my English teacher, continued to be a quiet support. One day, she handed me a flyer for a youth writing fellowship in another city. "I thought of you instantly," she said. "You have something to say. And you're finally saying it." That night, I applied without telling anyone. I wrote my personal statement in one sitting. I didn't try to sound impressive. I just told the truth. I used to think my voice didn't matter, that being quiet meant being overlooked. But now I know being quiet doesn't mean being weak. Sometimes it means watching closely, feeling deeply, and waiting until the moment you're ready to speak. This is my moment. 2 weeks later, I got the acceptance email. The program started in the spring, 3 months away. It wasn't just a workshop. It was a chance to move, to relocate for a year, a full scholarship, new city, new faces, no one knowing me as the other daughter. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel excited. At dinner that night, I told my parents. They both looked up from their plates. My mom blinked like she didn't quite understand. "Wait, what kind of program?" I explained. "The fellowship, the writing, the move." She frowned. "That's far. Isn't it a bit sudden?" My dad nodded slowly. "Are you sure you want to be that far away?" I wanted to laugh. Now they noticed. Now that I was leaving. "I've never been more sure about anything," I said. They didn't protest. They didn't hug me either. My mom just said, "Well, I guess we'll have to figure out how to manage things here without you." Without me. The girl who did the dishes. Who stayed quiet. Who never asked for anything. Now, suddenly, I was a convenience they had to live without. But I didn't feel guilty. Because this time, I wasn't running away. I was moving forward.
For me.
The next few months passed slowly, not because life was dragging, but because I had started paying attention to time differently. When you're always overlooked, days blur together. But now that I was planning my exit, every moment had weight. Every small choice, what to pack, what to leave, what to say and not say, felt like a quiet act of reclaiming myself. I didn't announce it to anyone beyond that first dinner. I didn't count down out loud, didn't post about the program. I wanted this new chapter to be mine. Not something for my parents to pretend to care about. Not something Emma could spin into a side comment about how cool it must be to get out of town. This wasn't about them. It never was. This was for the girl who sat alone on her 16th birthday, eating leftovers in silence. Still, I noticed the subtle shifts at home. My mom started asking if I'd need help moving, but her voice was more hesitant than warm. My dad started lingering around my doorway more, offering weak comments like, "Big move coming up, huh?" I nodded, smiled politely. I didn't shut them out, but I didn't invite them in either. That was the balance I had made peace with, distance without cruelty. Emma barely acknowledged anything. And honestly, I preferred it that way. We weren't enemies, just strangers forced into sisterhood. I'd spent years trying to understand why her presence had replaced mine in our parents' attention.
But now?
I didn't need answers. I didn't need closure from her. Just space. I focused on writing. On lists. On details. I made a little notebook labeled "Leaving," and in it I wrote everything. What I'd take, what I'd leave behind, quotes that reminded me of my strength, ideas for essays, and reminders that sounded like affirmations. You do not owe them guilt for choosing yourself. Some people will never clap when you win. Keep winning anyway. You don't have to be angry to walk away. You just have to be ready. I started applying to jobs near the new campus. Looked up cafes, bookstores, anywhere I could earn a little and stay surrounded by books and quiet. I wasn't looking for escape anymore. I was building something, and that felt different. It felt solid. The last week before the move, I started packing in silence. No drama. No tears. I folded clothes I hadn't worn in months. Packed journals I'd once hid under my bed. I found a dried-up birthday balloon from years ago tucked in the back of my closet from when I turned 11 and they took me to the zoo. It had faded letters and a tiny giraffe printed on it. For a second, I almost threw it away, but I didn't. I kept it. Not because I wanted to remember the good, but because I needed to remind myself that once they had remembered. That version of them existed. And maybe that version was just gone now. The night before I left, my mom knocked on my door. I was zipping up my suitcase when she stepped in. She looked at the packed boxes, the cleared shelves, the half-empty closet. "This really is happening, huh?" she said softly. I nodded.
Yeah.
She paused, then handed me a small envelope. "Just something for the trip. It's not much." I opened it after she left. A gift card, and a note in her handwriting. "Proud of you, even if we never said it right." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't healing, but it was something. My dad didn't say much that night, just hugged me briefly in the hallway. The kind of hug that says, "I should have done this more often," but never says it out loud. I didn't hold on to it. I let it be what it was. Emma was asleep when I left the next morning. Or maybe pretending to be. I didn't check. I carried my suitcase down the stairs, took one last look at the house, and walked out without saying goodbye. Not out of spite. Out of peace. Because I wasn't running. I was finally walking into something I chose. The train ride to my new city was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt clean. Not the silence I knew from home, the kind that pressed on your skin like judgment, but a stillness that wrapped itself around me like a beginning. I watched towns blur past the window, small houses and fading highways, and for once I didn't feel like I was escaping anything. I was simply arriving somewhere new. The program had arranged housing for us, a shared apartment with 2 other girls who were part of the same writing fellowship. I didn't know them yet, but I liked the sound of it already. No parents, no stepsisters, just a key in my own hand, and a space I didn't have to tiptoe around in. When I walked into the apartment, I smelled lavender and paper. Someone had lit a candle, and there were already books stacked in the corner. One of my roommates, Joy, popped out of the kitchen with a messy bun and a wooden spoon in her hand. She smiled wide and said, "You must be the quiet one." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She laughed. "The program director told us one of you didn't say a word on the Zoom call. We guessed that was you."
I smiled, for real this time.
Guilty. The second roommate, Nora, was quieter but kind. She offered to help me unpack, and we spent the evening folding clothes and taping notes on the fridge about chores and coffee preferences. It felt easy. I didn't have to perform. I didn't have to shrink myself. I didn't have to wonder if someone would look right through me. And when I lay down that first night in my new room, the walls still bare, my suitcase half unpacked, I felt something I hadn't felt in years.
Safe.
Over the next few weeks, I adjusted to this new rhythm. Early writing workshops, bookstore shifts in the afternoons, late-night ramen on the floor with my roommates. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't perfectly smooth, but it was mine. Entirely mine. I started keeping a new journal. Not the kind where I spilled pain, but the kind where I recorded moments that made me feel alive. A compliment from my mentor. A favorite line from someone else's story. The first time I laughed so hard during dinner, I snorted water out of my nose. And slowly, I realized I didn't need the people who forgot me to remember me. I was doing just fine without their recognition. One day, Joy asked casually, "When's your birthday?" I froze for a second, then said, "It passed a few months ago." She frowned.
What?
"And you didn't celebrate?" I shrugged. "Wasn't really a thing this year." She didn't push, just nodded, but her face shifted like she was storing that information somewhere important. A few weeks later, my birthday came up in a writing prompt. We were asked to write about a moment that marked a shift in how you saw yourself. Without planning it, I wrote about the night I came home to find a birthday party, just not mine. I didn't name names.
Didn't dramatize it.
I just wrote the truth. And when I finished reading it to the group, the room fell into that deep, holding silence. My mentor leaned forward and said, "That felt like watching someone stand up in a room where she's always been seated." After the session, one of the other fellows, a boy named Eli, came up to me and said, "I've had birthdays like that too. You're not alone." That night, I realized something I hadn't dared to believe before. People don't have to know your whole history to make space for your heart. They just have to see you. Really see you. Joy and Nora didn't forget what I said. Weeks later, on a random Saturday morning, I walked into the kitchen to find a single slice of cake on the counter, with a candle stuck in it and a note that read, Happy late birthday for the one you should have gotten. I didn't cry, not then. I just smiled and sat down and ate that cake one bite at a time. But later, in my room, I did cry. Quietly. Gratefully. Because that tiny gesture, that one candle, meant more to me than any glittering party ever could. It wasn't grand. It wasn't performative. It was intentional. And that's what I'd been missing all along. Not attention, but intention. Not a party full of people, but a room where someone chose to remember. For my 17th birthday, which was still months away, I decided something. I would throw myself a celebration. Nothing fancy. No invites. Just a day where I would treat myself with the kind of tenderness I kept begging others for. I started planning early. Not the party details, the emotional ones. I made a playlist of songs that made me feel brave. I bookmarked a bakery in the city with tiny chocolate tarts. I found a secondhand dress at a thrift shop, deep green, soft as sleep, and promised myself I'd wear it, even if no one else saw. And in my journal, I wrote, next time I blow out candles, it won't be for a wish. It'll be for a thank you to myself. For surviving every year, no one celebrated me. The morning of my 17th birthday felt different. Not because the sun looked brighter, or because the sky was particularly kind, but because this time, for the first time, I didn't wake up waiting. I didn't check my phone for messages that wouldn't come. I didn't listen for voices outside my door. I already knew. No one from back home was going to remember. And somehow that didn't hurt. I got out of bed quietly, walked to the window, and looked out at the street below. The city was already alive. Coffee carts wheeling into place, cyclists rushing past, someone humming down the block. It was ordinary. And yet, in my chest, there was something steady and soft. Peace. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that sits with you quietly, reminding you that you don't need anyone else to make today matter. I slipped into the green thrifted dress I had bought weeks earlier. It wasn't fancy, but it made me feel held, like I'd wrapped myself in softness after years of cold shoulders. I brushed my hair, swiped on a little lip gloss, and looked in the mirror. No birthday banner behind me. No streamers. No forced smile. Just a girl who had learned how to keep living even when the people she loved most forgot how to show up. Joy was the first to spot me that morning in the kitchen. She looked up from her cereal bowl and blinked, then smiled like the sun rising. Oh my God. You look beautiful. Wait, is it today? I nodded, a little shy.
Yeah.
She got up, hugged me, and whispered, Happy birthday. I'm glad you're here. That was all I needed. We didn't make a big deal of it. Nora joined us later and handed me a folded note with a hand-drawn star on the front. Inside, it just said, The girl who remembered herself, my favorite kind of story. I carried that note in my pocket all day. Instead of classes, I'd requested the day off from the program. I'd planned every hour. Not tightly, but intentionally. First stop, the bookstore I loved, where I let myself wander for over an hour. I bought a hardcover I couldn't afford, not because I needed it, but because I deserved something beautiful with weight. Then I went to a tiny cafe Joy had recommended and ordered the most ridiculous pastry on the menu, something with caramel and lavender and pistachio. I ate slowly, alone, with music in my ears and sunlight on my table. Not once did I check my phone. It buzzed a few times, mostly promotions, a couple of newsletters, and a single group message from back home where Emma was ranting about losing her earrings.
Not a word about me.
Not from my mother. Not from my father. Not even a lazy, last-minute emoji from anyone in the house I used to live in. But that wasn't the headline of my day. Not anymore. Around 4 p.m., I took the train to the river. There was a small overlook I had discovered my second week in the city. Quiet, a bit hidden, but full of space and sky. I sat there for hours, letting the wind move through my thoughts, watching as the city softened into gold. It was the most present I'd ever felt on my own birthday. And as the sun began to set, I reached into my bag and pulled out a single cupcake I had brought from the bakery earlier. Just one, with a tiny plastic candle that I'd tucked inside a napkin. I lit it. The flame wobbled in the breeze, but it stayed. I didn't wish for anything. I didn't ask the universe for more love or more recognition or more belonging. I just closed my eyes and said thank you. Thank you for every night I cried and still got up the next day. Thank you for the parts of me that didn't harden. Thank you for teaching me how to stay soft in a world that made me feel small. Thank you for not letting one forgotten birthday define the rest of my life. I blew out the candle. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like forgiveness. Not for them. For me. That night, Joy and Nora surprised me with a small dinner, nothing grand. Pasta, laughter, a playlist we all loved. They didn't try to fill the silence of what I had lost. They just added new music to it. And I let them. When I finally got into bed, the city still humming softly outside, I wrote one last journal entry for the day. Today, I turned 17. No decorations. No crowd. Just me, and somehow that was enough. Maybe birthdays don't have to be about being celebrated. Maybe they're just reminders that you're still here, still growing, still worthy, even when no one claps. I closed the notebook and smiled. For the first time in my life, my birthday wasn't a wound. It was a beginning. A few weeks after my 17th birthday, something unexpected happened. One of my essays, the one I wrote during the fellowship about the night I walked in on Emma's birthday party, got published on a small online journal. I hadn't told anyone from home, not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't think they'd care. I titled it The Night the Balloons Weren't for Me.
It was raw.
Not spiteful, not dramatic, just the truth, laid bare in paragraphs. I changed names. I removed specific details. But the heart of it, the girl standing in the doorway, hoping the celebration was hers, only to realize she had been erased. That part was real. That part had lived in my chest for over a year, and now, finally, it was breathing. The piece began to circulate, first among fellowship peers, then through their networks, and then wider. One evening, I opened my inbox to find a message from a woman in her 40s. She wrote, "I was the girl in the corner too. You gave my silence a name. Thank you." Another message came from a teenage boy who said he'd never understood his sister's distance until reading my piece. He said, "I think I was the Emma in our house. I'm sorry." I was stunned and humbled because this story, which once felt like my private shame, had become a mirror for strangers. And in that reflection, they were healing too. But with visibility comes reach. And with reach comes the possibility of being seen by those you didn't expect to notice. One morning, I got a message from a number I hadn't saved, but recognized immediately.
Mom.
Is this essay about us?
Just that.
No punctuation, no emotion, just the question. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands didn't move. My chest stayed still, because I didn't know what to feel. Fear? Anger? Guilt? Relief? I replied carefully. It's about what happened to me. If you see yourself in it, maybe it's because you were there too.
She didn't respond.
Not that day. Not the next. Not for 2 weeks. Then, late one night, a single email landed in my inbox. Not from her personal account, but from the family one. The subject line, "Read it again." The body was just a few sentences. I didn't realize how much we didn't say. I thought you were strong enough to handle it. That's what we always told ourselves. That you didn't need much. But maybe what we really meant was you didn't complain. And we mistook that silence for contentment. I read the essay 3 times. I cried the third.
I'm sorry.
I know it's late, and I know it's not enough, but I see you now.
Mom.
I closed the laptop slowly and sat in silence for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just let the words settle, like dust falling gently in a room I'd left behind. That night, I didn't write back. Not because I was angry, but because some words need time to land. And some healing doesn't need a reply, just breath. The next day, Joy and I went for a walk. I told her everything.
The essay.
The messages. The email. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she said, "You know, I've always wondered what it would be like for your mom to read your work. I guess now we know." I asked her, "Do you think it matters? That she finally sees me? She shrugged. Maybe. But what matters more is that you saw yourself long before she did. That's what changed everything. She was right. Because even if my mother never apologized again, even if she never threw a party or wrote me a card or lit a single candle in my name, I had already built something bigger than her recognition. I had built a voice.
A voice that didn't beg.
Didn't shrink. Didn't wait for applause. A voice that told the truth. First in a whisper, then in a sentence, then in a story that reached thousands. That was the real gift. Later that week, I got an unexpected package in the mail. No return address. Just my name and handwriting I hadn't seen in a long time. Inside was a small white box. A birthday candle. Shaped like the number 16. No note. No explanation.
Just that. I stared at it for a long time.
My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. It didn't feel like guilt. It felt like acknowledgement.
Late.
Quiet. Small. But real. I didn't light it. I placed it in the drawer beside my bed. Not to remind myself of what I lost, but of how far I'd come. Because that candle, the one they never lit for me, had finally reached me. And I didn't need it to glow. I had become the flame. Things didn't change overnight. My parents didn't suddenly become warm or expressive. My stepsister didn't reach out. There were no dramatic reunions or phone calls where everything was said and forgiven. But something inside me had shifted permanently, and that mattered more than any apology. For the first time, I wasn't looking backward anymore. I wasn't aching for something to come from a place that had already shown me what it could and couldn't offer. I had stopped hoping for a retroactive love. I was finally pouring all of it forward. As the fellowship continued, I was asked to help lead a small writing circle for high school girls from underserved communities. It was once a month, casual, low pressure, just a safe space for them to talk and write. On the first day, I stood at the front of the room and looked at the group of 12 teenage girls. Some were loud and curious, others quiet and guarded. I recognized the guarded ones immediately. I used to be that girl, the one who never raised her hand, who didn't trust adults to listen, who kept her wounds hidden under sarcasm or silence. I started by sharing my own story, not the polished version, not the published version, just the truth, plain and simple. I told them about the forgotten birthday, about the silence, about watching someone else blow out candles while I stood in the doorway like a ghost. I didn't look for pity in their eyes. I just wanted them to know I wasn't above them. I was them. Still am, in many ways. One girl, she couldn't have been older than 15, asked quietly, "Did it ever stop hurting?" I paused before answering, then said, "It doesn't stop. It changes. The pain stops being sharp. It becomes something softer, something that doesn't control you anymore. And eventually it becomes the reason you grow, even when they never say sorry." They wrote about things I couldn't believe they were brave enough to put into words. One girl wrote about her father missing her every birthday since she was 7. Another wrote about being treated like a mistake her mother never wanted to make. Another one wrote a single line that sat in my chest for days. "I keep showing up for people who forget I'm even there." We didn't try to fix anything in those sessions. We just wrote. We read. We listened. And for most of them, that was more than anyone had done in years. Back at the apartment, I started thinking about what it would look like to make space for these stories permanently, not just in rooms once a month, but in print, online, in zines, in journals. I pitched the idea to my program mentor, a digital magazine entirely run by girls from the margins. Girls who had been forgotten, overlooked, silenced, or forced into roles they never asked for. She loved it. The board approved a seed grant. And just like that, the idea had a heartbeat. We called it the Quiet Table. Because for years, girls like us had been sitting at the edge of everything, family conversations, school assemblies, holidays, birthdays, watching from the sidelines while louder, more visible people took the seat at the center. Now, the Quiet Table would be the only table that mattered. We launched with 4 pieces. All anonymous. All powerful. My essay, the same one that started it all, served as the introduction. I didn't add my name to it this time. I didn't need to. The words weren't about me anymore. They were about us. The magazine began to grow. Slowly, organically, one story at a time. And every time a submission came in, I read it like I was holding someone's heartbeat in my hands. Because I knew what it cost to write it down. And I made a promise to myself that I would protect these voices like I wish someone had protected mine. One evening, after uploading the latest issue, I sat at my desk and opened my journal. Not the one filled with pain. The new one. The one where I'd started recording strength. And I wrote something I'd never written before. I'm proud of the girl who waited. And I'm proud of the woman who stopped waiting. Then I flipped back to the first page, where a quote I'd scribbled months ago was still faintly visible. You don't have to be angry to walk away. You just have to be ready. I was ready now. Fully. I didn't need them to throw me a party. I didn't need a cake. I didn't need candles or cards or confetti. I just needed what I'd given myself. Presence, permission, and peace. And somehow, in all the letting go, I had found everything I was searching for. It was late, close to midnight, when I sat down to write her a letter. Not my mom, not Emma, not anyone from home. But her. The girl I used to be. The one who waited by the door, who watched the party unfold from a distance, who tried to smile through the kind of heartbreak no one else in the room even noticed. I didn't plan to write it. I had just finished editing a submission for the Quiet Table, another story from a girl who said her birthday was always treated like a calendar error. Her words hit something raw inside me. So I closed the document, opened a new page, and began typing.
Hey.
I know you're sitting alone in your room right now, trying not to cry loud enough for them to hear. You're probably wondering what you did wrong, why they remembered her and not you, why your 16th birthday passed by like a shadow instead of a celebration. I know how much you wanted someone to notice, someone to light a candle and say, you matter. But let me tell you something they never did. You do. Not because you stayed quiet, or because you didn't complain, or because you helped with the dishes while everyone else laughed in another room. You matter because even in their silence, you didn't disappear. You stayed. You kept breathing. You didn't let their neglect erase you. One day, you'll stop waiting for them to clap. You'll start clapping for yourself. And you'll meet people who see you before you have to prove anything. One day, you'll write stories that help others feel less alone. You'll build something real from the very pain that made you feel invisible. So hold on. Not because they'll come around, maybe they won't, but because you will. You'll come around to yourself. And that will be the day everything changes. When I finished, I just sat there. Not crying, not smiling, just breathing. That letter wasn't for publication. It wasn't a post or a column or a statement. It was just a message sent backward in time, to the part of me that had carried this weight in silence for far too long. Later that week, I had lunch with my mentor, the one who had first encouraged me to publish my birthday essay. She had read the latest issue of The Quiet Table and said, "You've created something rare, something soft and sharp at the same time." I told her, sometimes I still wonder if it was selfish to write about my family, to put that out there. She shook her head gently. Truth isn't selfish. And your story didn't attack anyone. It held up a mirror. What people see in it, that's theirs to carry. I nodded. She was right. There's a difference between writing for revenge and writing for release. And I had let go of revenge a long time ago. One afternoon, while cleaning up my bookshelf, I found the white candle again, the 16-shaped one my mother had sent in the box with no note. I held it for a few minutes, turning it over in my hands. It still hadn't been used. I thought about lighting it. Just once. Just to see it burn. But then I smiled and placed it back inside the drawer, not out of bitterness, but because I no longer needed it to prove anything. Its job was done. It had arrived. I had seen it, and I had moved on. A few nights later, I sat with Joy and Nora on our rooftop. We had started doing that more often, just sitting in silence, watching the city lights flicker on like fireflies. That night, Nora asked me something I wasn't expecting. "What does family mean to you now?" I took a deep breath and looked up at the sky, then said, "I think family is anyone who doesn't make you question your worth after you've already proven it 1,000 times." Joy nodded slowly. That's heavy. It's true, I said. Blood never guaranteed kindness, or effort, or celebration. I paused, then added, and the people who've cheered for me the loudest lately? None of them were in that house I grew up in. That was the most honest thing I'd said in weeks. Because the truth is, I had redefined family in the most unexpected ways. Family was Joy, who left a cupcake on the counter just because she knew I deserved one. Family was Nora, who wrote me a birthday note even though she'd only known me for 3 months. Family was the girls in the writing circle, who shared their hurt like truth, not shame. Family was anyone who stayed after the story was told, not just to hear the ending, but to hold the pain in the middle. And for the first time in my life, I realized something I never believed I'd say. I wasn't unloved. I was just misnamed. And now, I was finally learning how to name myself. When my 18th birthday finally came, it didn't sneak up on me like the others. I had been preparing for it for months. Not the kind of preparation that involved decorations or invitations or a curated guest list. This time I was preparing emotionally. I was building something quiet, steady, and sacred. This birthday wasn't going to be about proving anything to anyone. Not to my parents. Not to my past. Not even to the girl I used to be. It was just going to be for me. I woke up early that morning. The city was still half asleep, pale light spilling through the cracks in the blinds. My room was warm, peaceful, filled with small things I had collected over the last year that made it feel like a place I belonged to. A dried flower from my favorite cafe. A print of a poem that once made me cry. A postcard from a reader who had said my story helped her tell her own. I made my bed carefully, washed my face slowly, wore the soft black dress I'd been saving. It wasn't glamorous, just simple and clean, and when I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see the forgotten daughter anymore. I saw a young woman who had carried herself across an ocean of neglect and still stood tall. Joy and Nora had made plans that day, but I told them not to cancel. It's okay, I said. I want to be alone for most of it. And they understood, like real friends do. Before leaving, Joy handed me a tiny box with a ribbon. Inside was a necklace, silver, delicate, with a small open circle as a charm. She smiled and said, "For the girl who made space for herself." I hugged her tight. No words. Just that kind of gratitude that lives in your chest. I spent the morning walking, nowhere special. Just wandering. Through streets I'd memorized and alleys I hadn't yet explored. I stopped at the bookstore where I used to spend hours, not because I needed anything, but because it felt like returning to an old version of myself, just to let her know we made it. Then I grabbed coffee from a cart where the barista always remembered my name and sat by the water with a small journal in my lap. I started writing a list, not of resolutions, not of goals, just of things I knew now. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. Someone's silence is not your responsibility. Attention is not the same as love. You're allowed to leave when your heart stops feeling safe. You can be your own celebration. When I reached number 5, I closed the journal and just let myself sit there, still, whole, 17 for the very last time. Around noon, I bought a slice of cake. Not a whole cake. Just one perfect slice from a tiny bakery that didn't know it was a big day. I didn't put a candle in it. I didn't make a wish. I just ate it slowly, thinking about every birthday before this one. The ones that stung, the ones that went silent, the one that broke something in me. And then, I let those memories float away, not erased, but finally released. Later that evening, I returned home. Joy and Nora had left a note taped to my door. "Dinner's on us tonight. Come hungry. Come healed." And then, I let those memories float away, not erased, but finally released. I didn't need to erase the pain anymore. I just needed it to stop defining me. Later that evening, I returned home. Joy and Nora had left a note taped to my door. It read, "Dinner's on us tonight. Come hungry. Come healed." And that's exactly how I showed up. They'd made pasta, my favorite. Lit candles on the kitchen counter. They even played that playlist I'd made months ago, the one full of songs I used to cry to when I thought no one remembered me.
But tonight?
Those songs didn't sound like grief anymore. They sounded like survival, like proof. After dinner, Nora dimmed the lights and turned on the projector. At first, I didn't know what I was watching. But then I saw myself, my writing group, the blog, girls I had mentored through the quiet table, and then it clicked. It was a video, a compilation of voices, clips from readers, strangers who had become community, girls from small towns and big cities, women who had carried stories for too long. Each one looked into the camera and said something small, but sacred. You made me feel like I mattered. Because of your story, I told mine. I didn't know someone else had been forgotten too. Now I know I'm not alone. I cried, not the kind of tears you hide behind sleeves or quiet breathing. These were the kind of tears that come from being witnessed, not pitted. And they fell freely. Because this wasn't about cake, or candles, or frosting that never had my name on it. This was about impact. It was about being seen, not by the people who forgot me, but by the ones who found me in the ashes. That night, as I lay in bed, full, quiet, whole, I thought about how far I had come. From that doorway on my 16th birthday, watching someone else blow out candles meant for me, to this, my 18th birthday, quiet and mine, peaceful and earned. And no, my parents didn't call. No text. No, we forgot excuse. No joke wrapped in awkwardness. But I didn't expect it. And more importantly, I didn't need it. Because somewhere along the way, I had stopped needing their attention to feel real. I had stopped hoping their love would show up like a late package. I had learned how to love myself better than they ever did. And that realization, that quiet, steady truth, that was worth celebrating. Months passed. Seasons shifted like they always do. Spring bloomed across the city like a soft apology, and everything looked a little brighter. But inside me, the biggest shift wasn't visible. It was something only I could feel. A change that didn't come with fireworks or grand speeches. Just a quiet understanding that I no longer checked the door to see who forgot me. I had stopped waiting. Stopped hoping they'd remember the milestones. Stopped watching birthdays pass with that ache in my chest. And in that stillness, I discovered something that no party, no apology, no glitter-filled celebration could ever give me. Self-recognition. Not the kind that comes from applause, but the kind that comes from watching yourself rebuild. Brick by quiet brick. The quiet table had grown in ways I never expected. What began as my personal therapy project had turned into something real. Something big. A movement. A digital place where the forgotten could finally be remembered. Where silent sons and invisible daughters could write without censoring themselves. I wasn't the center of it anymore, and I didn't want to be. Because now it belonged to all of us. I was just part of the choir. A collection of voices that once whispered pain in echoing bedrooms, now singing with boldness. One day, I received a letter. A real one. Envelope. Handwritten. The return address? A small town I'd never even heard of. It was from a girl named Alina. She was 16. She had found the quiet table through a friend, who had found it through another friend. Her handwriting shook. She wrote, I didn't even know it was okay to be hurt by something like a forgotten birthday. I thought I was just sensitive. That I was the problem. But then I read your piece. I cried for 2 hours. Because it was like someone finally gave me permission to grieve something no one else thought mattered. She ended her letter with this. You helped me realize I don't need a party to be real. I just need to stop hiding the parts of me that wanted to be seen in the first place. I held her letter for a long time. And in that moment, I remembered why we tell our stories. Not to fix the past, but to help someone else survive theirs. That night, I reread old journals, pages filled with pain, confusion, and quiet rage. I didn't cringe. I didn't tear them out. I let the words sit in my hands like proof. Proof that I kept going. Proof that I didn't quit. Even when no one clapped. Even when no one showed up. I felt proud of the girl who wrote them. She didn't demand attention.
She didn't yell.
She just kept believing there was something better on the other side of neglect. She was the one who, at 16, made a quiet vow. If no one celebrates me, I'll learn to celebrate myself.
And she did.
A few weeks later, I hosted one last writing circle before the end of the season. 10 girls, some familiar, some new, no writing prompts, no goals, just one simple act. We wrote letters to our younger selves, and then we read them aloud. I heard stories of sisters forgotten, of mothers who only loved loudly when guests were watching, of birthdays that felt more like anniversaries of absence than celebrations. And I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. I just held the space, the way no one had held it for me. And in that stillness, I finally heard it. Forgiveness. Not loud, not dramatic,
But deep. Real.
I had forgiven them, not because they had earned it, not because they had changed, but because I no longer needed their version of love to survive. A few days later, I walked back to the same river I visited on my 17th birthday. Same dress, same spot, same wind. In my hand, one match, and one note. The note said, to the girl who watched from the hallway, "You made it." I lit it. Let the flame take the edges. Let it burn, slow, steady, beautiful, and watched the ashes scatter like secrets finally set free. I whispered one word. Thank you. Not to them. Not to the world.
To me.
Thank you for staying. Thank you for choosing yourself before anyone else ever did. Thank you for never letting silence be the only sound in your life. And then I walked away, not lighter, but whole, because I had finally learned something it took me years to understand. You don't have to be remembered to be real. You don't have to be clapped for to be strong. And sometimes the most beautiful kind of party is the life you build when no one else shows up. And that's exactly what I had done. I used to think justice meant repayment, that once the money was returned, once the debt was evened out, I'd finally feel better.
Whole. Free.
But what no one tells you is that justice can't rewrite a childhood. It can't refill the parts of you that went without. It can't comfort the 10-year-old version of you who sat quietly, listening to your parents whisper about money while pretending you weren't in the room. It can't bring back birthdays where you felt invisible, or teenage summers when you thought you had a future secured, only to realize someone had already started spending it. And I had finally reached a place in my life where owning my story meant more than fixing it. After the last transfer, I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't even feel grateful. I felt something else. Release. Because they didn't give the money back out of guilt. They gave it back because they were forced to. It wasn't a gesture of remorse. It was a transaction. And I had made peace with that. Let them live in their excuses. Let them keep their story. Because I had mine now. And mine was rooted in truth. I began focusing on the quiet table more seriously. It wasn't just a blog anymore. It was becoming a platform. We started getting submissions from all over the world. Kids who had grown up financially manipulated. Women who found out their wedding savings were spent on a sibling's rehab. Men who were told real men don't ask about money until their accounts were drained. Every story was different, but everyone echoed mine in some way. And through those stories, I started building something bigger than my pain, a legacy of voice. Clara, my co-editor, called me one evening and said something I'll never forget. "You're not just healing, you're anchoring people." It hit me. I was no longer trying to climb out of the rubble. I was planting foundations inside of it, so that someone else wouldn't have to fall so hard next time. Around that same time, I was invited to speak at a local high school. Topic: financial boundaries and emotional trust. It felt surreal, standing in front of a room of teenagers, telling them the one thing no adult ever told me. It's okay to ask questions about your money, even if the people managing it are your parents. I saw their eyes widen, a mix of shock and relief. No one had ever said that to them before. No one had ever told them that silence wasn't loyalty, it was vulnerability dressed up in obedience. After the talk, a girl came up to me. Her hands were shaking. "My dad's always telling me not to worry my little head about bank stuff. But I'm 17. I have a job. And I don't even know if the savings account in my name is real." She didn't ask for advice.
She just needed to say it.
And I just needed to hear it. Because every time someone tells the truth out loud, the silence gets smaller. That night, I journaled for the first time in weeks. But this time, I didn't write about pain. I wrote about power, how it shifts, how it gets reclaimed, how it can be taken without notice, but also taken back with full intention, and how sometimes we don't get closure. We just get clarity. And clarity is enough to change your life. If this story felt like a mirror, if you've ever been told not to ask questions, if your voice was silenced with guilt or your future rewritten without permission, then let this be a reminder. You are not wrong for wanting answers. You are not dramatic for grieving what was taken. And you are not alone in this. Drop a comment if this touched a part of you no one talks about. Share this video with someone who deserves to reclaim their story. Subscribe, because I'll keep telling the stories we were told to keep quiet. And maybe, just maybe, your story is next. Because your voice, it doesn't just deserve to be heard, it deserves to be honored.